Well, let's then start. You've got this incredible life journey that started in college when you had anxiety and you had depression, and then tell us what happened about that, and tell us this story.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, let me ask you this: did you battle with anxiety, depression as a little kid, or did it kind of hit you because college kind of hit you over the head and there was something happened? Let's hear that.
Yeah, so I experienced my first feelings of anxiety when I was in my freshman year at university. I never experienced anything like it. I was a very happy-go-lucky guy. On paper, everything was really looking great. I had a academic scholarship. I was on the national under-19 rugby team. And rugby in my part of Canada is huge, right? It was sort of where the national team trained, and I always say it's the third biggest sport behind hockey and hockey. So it's always a big deal. But I put a lot of pressure on myself always. I don't really know why my parents didn't put a lot of pressure on myself, but I just did. And so we were training for the World Cup, which was in Paris, France, and I would practice my field goals every day. I played fly half. It's like the quarterback and field goal kicker in one. So there's a lot of pressure. I put a lot of pressure on myself. And I started thinking, like, what if I blow it and miss a easy kick at the World Cup? Like, what if I miss a kick right from the goalposts and just totally ruin this once in a lifetime opportunity, right? This is your shot, basically, is where I'm coming from. So,
and this is age 19. This is age 19.
Yeah, 19, 20, yeah. And so I would think about this at night, and it would cause me to lose sleep. So this anxiety would cause me to have trouble sleeping. I had missed a kick at the end of the high school championship game that could have won us the game. So I was like, that can't happen again, And so I think about this at night. I started to lose sleep. This constant pressure that I put on myself, this anxiety, this loss of sleep, it all contributed to me sliding into a depression. And it was slow and it was gradual, but it was debilitating to the point where I couldn't go to school. I couldn't go to rugby practice. So I got dropped from the team. I dropped out of school. Eventually to the point where I couldn't really even leave the house, my parents' house. So I was a shut-in in my parents' house, and I was just almost forced by my parents to go for a 15-minute walk every day to get outside and get some fresh air and leave the house. Wow. And sometimes I would just...
So you go from being like an elite athlete to being in the house. For how long did that last?
A couple months. It wasn't until my friends came at the end of the semester that I had already dropped out of, and they kind of pulled me out of the house, rallied me and dragged me out of the house to come work with them in a new town for the summer. And then I slowly started to come out of these feelings. So and there's a lot of things that contributed that we can talk about. But I got a job, so I was forced to do things for myself, so I started to feel a sense of self-worth. I was starting to talk about what I was going through, and I realized that my friends had experienced something like this, or they were going through something similar, like I wasn't alone, which at that point, I just thought I was totally crazy, right? I thought I was messed up, and I started to understand that I wasn't the only one, and I took comfort in that fact. And now I know, of course, like this is the human experience. Like everyone will go through some sort of mental health crisis in their life. And I think this is a particularly important conversation right now because more people than ever are struggling, especially young people going through high school, college right now. It's hard enough to go through high school and college in any time. Layer on the pandemic, layer on social media. I have so many parents coming up and talk to me after my keynote saying my son, my daughter dropped out of school, high-level athlete, and now can't leave the house. So my story is not an original story, unfortunately, and it's happening now more than ever. So it's a very important conversation. And the good thing about this is that as I went through this, and anytime I go through any type of struggle, I learn things about myself and I start to understand myself better. I also build empathy for other people. So I really believe that these things that we think are our weaknesses can actually turn into our strengths when we stop trying to hide them all the time and actually embrace them and embrace that this is who I am and start to talk about them. Because the one thing you don't want to do is just try and solve this problem on your own. I really believe that you need to share it with a professional like a psychiatrist or a therapist or a loved one. So, side note from the story, but it's an important side note, I think, because there are so many people, unfortunately, that are going through it right now.
So Ben, you had mentioned something. So you just said that it's almost everybody. I mean, I don't know if I've thought of it that way. I always think of there's this really high percentage of people that do have anxiety, depression. It's very common. But to your point, it's almost uncommon for you not to have some of that. It's almost like most people, like 80-90% of people do go through either some period in their life where they really do experience that. I don't know if I've heard it in that context. It's like the vast majority of people have something like this in their life.
Yeah, and I believe that's what the research tells us, is that everyone will go through some sort of mental health crisis in their life. And it's not necessarily due to a mental illness. It could be a divorce. It could be bereavement because a loved one passed away, stress from life, So this is this happens to human beings. We have ups and we have downs, and that's okay. What's not okay is just to not talk about it. And I think that the idea of being true to yourself is really important. Everything feels like it pulls you away from that. And I think there's two sides of being true to yourself. There's being true to yourself and not hiding those things that you're struggling with, but it's also being true to yourself and doing the things that are important to you, that you love, that you're passionate about. And that's my definition of a bucket list, is those things that are going to bring you joy and happiness and fulfillment that only you know what those are. And in a world where most people live for what they think they should do or what other people want for them, we need a reminder of the things that are important to us, because it's so easy to get pulled away from that. And this is what this whole project is based on, a poem that articulated this same feeling, but it was written in 1852. So again, this is not a new idea. This is the human condition. The day-to-day buries the things that we truly want to do. And that's why we continually tend to push these bucket list items, these passions, these personal goals. And we don't realize that we don't actually have as much time as we think. And these are the biggest regrets that we have at the end of our life, is not doing those things. And so this is all stuff we didn't realize as college kids. We were just, I was coming out of this depression, and I thought, when I was away at this new in this new town, I started to meet young kids that were inspiring. So I met these kids that had started their own businesses right out of high school. I never met kids like that. They had already traveled around the world. I never met kids like that.
Was this in Canada, or where were you?
Yeah. So I grew up in Victoria, British Columbia, and I went to work in Banff, Alberta. And so
Banff, beautiful.
The summer away, I started to meet these interesting people. I started to realize that they gave me energy, and that some people drew energy from me and some people gave energy to me. And so I was inspired by these kids, and I thought, after that summer away, I was starting to feel back to myself. I thought, okay, I'm going to try and only surround myself with people that inspire me, just like those kids. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know it, but that was the one decision that changed my life forever, was being intentional about the people I surrounded myself and trying to seek out kids that gave me energy, that inspired me, and that supported me to be the truest version of myself. And so that's why I reached out to this kid that I knew a little bit, but not very well, when I got back home. And he was a filmmaker. His name was Johnny. And I reached out to him. I said, hey, Johnny, you make movies. I've always wanted to make a movie. Let's make a movie. And that's how The Buried Life started, was really from this decision to surround myself with people that were going to inspire me. And so that was the birth of The Buried Life.
So The Buried Life, though. So tell me the story, though. So your friends pull you out of your house. You go to Banff for the summer. You realize that you certain people give you this huge amount of energy, this inspiration. You go back and you say, all right, let's essentially go do a big road trip. And this is then the Buried Life. And did you guys is that correct? And did you have money? And tell me about like the money and the financing and the idea.
Yeah. So initially we didn't know what the film was going to be about, or the road trip. It was like, let's make a movie. And we're trying to figure out what this is about, but we realized we have something in common, which is like, we all have all these things that we'd always wanted to do, these dreams, but we've never even tried to go after any of them ever. Why? Like what, and so then serendipitously, Johnny's at university gets assigned this poem, The Buried Life, as homework. He reads the poem and he's like, holy crap, this poem is talking about the same thing that we're talking about. That we have all these things that we want to do, but we haven't done them because they're buried. And we have these moments when we're inspired to go after those things, but life gets in the way, right? That we push them. And so we thought, okay, we're not the first people on earth to feel like this. If this poem was written in 1852.
1852, yeah.
So let's take this name for our film, The Buried Life. And so the next step was, okay, how do we unbury our dreams? And for us, the way that we did that was death, thinking about our death. Because for us, the thought of dying was the only thing that put things in perspective. And when we confronted that, we realized what was truly important. And so we would ask ourselves this question, what do you want to do before you die? And so that became the thing that we would end up asking the world, as many people as possible. Because we thought, okay, our answer to that question, well, that's our bucket list. Those are the things we want to do before I die. And so the list grew out of this question. And we thought, okay, we're going to hit the road for a 2-week road trip to tackle our bucket list, but we'll also ask strangers the question, what do you want to do before you die? And if we can help them do that thing, then we will. So we'll cross things off our list. We'll help other people. We'll make a movie about it. We'll hit the road for 2 weeks in 2006, and we'll be done. Okay, so this is 2006. So
you thought you would do this all within 2 weeks?
Yeah, we'd be like, we're done. We'll show it to our buddies in the neighborhood. It'll be fun. We'll post it on Facebook. This is early days Facebook.
Yeah, early Facebook days, yeah.
Yeah.
And hold on, did you make the list first, Ben? Did you make your list of and then go, and then start to grow? What was on the initial? Tell me about the initial list.
My new book is called The Bucket List Journal, and I have the list in here. It's like, this is where you track all your goals and stay accountable to them. So things like, big things like make a TV show, pay off our parents' mortgage, sit with Oprah, write a New York Times bestseller, play basketball with President Obama, but also things like grow a mustache, pay for someone's groceries, tell a judge you want the truth, you can't handle the truth. So like it was.
So first of all, you got to get into court to do that.
Exactly.
So you got to get arrested in order to do that.
Exactly. That's why that's one of the 4 we haven't done yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, you can.
We
I guess
have
you
gotten
could always
arrested
be in
though, but not. We haven't pulled that one out yet. Yeah. So we wrote this list, and now we're like, okay, we didn't have any money. So we started throwing parties as fundraisers. We would cold call companies out of the phone book looking for sponsorship. The community came together to give us stuff to give away. We boarded an RV. We made a website with our 100 dreams and a contact page. We bought a camera on eBay and we hit the road. Okay. So we hit the road. But what happened that was unexpected was as soon as we start to travel, the news started to pick up this story of these 4 friends going after their list. And people started to hear about it, and emails started to come in through our website. And they'd say, hey, I saw your list on your website. Number 8 is ride a bull. My uncle has a bull ranch. He can get you on a bull. Or, I saw, tell a judge you want the truth, you can't handle the truth. My friend's a judge. Maybe he'll let you do it. So, and then people started sending us their dreams, asking for our help. So we started to get inundated with all these emails. I want you guys to cross all the things off your list. Let me know how I can help. Here's my dream. How can you guys help? And it was in, national news, and all of a sudden we're like, wow, we got to keep doing this. We came back from that 2-week road trip. We had helped all these people. We had these amazing experiences. And I was starting to feel this sense of purpose. And so we thought, okay, let's go back to school and let's do this again next summer. But instead of a 2-week road trip, let's go for 2 months. And let's go to the U.S. across the border, and let's buy an old purple transit bus, and let's live in it for 2 months, and let's help more people. Let's go after bigger list items. And so we did it again. And so cut to 10 years later, we were still doing it. So this 2-week road trip ended up lasting, over 10 years. And the list items that we initially wrote that were, when we wrote the list, we had 2 rules. You had to pretend you had $10 million, and you had to pretend that you could do anything. So the list items were quite crazy.
So wait, say that again. So you had to tell me that part again.
So when we wrote the list, You had to pretend you had $10 million in your bank account, and you also had to pretend that you had the ability to do anything.
Okay, so $10 million, and you can say you have unlimited. It's totally unlimited. Okay.
Yeah, you had the funds, you had the means, you had the ability. So the point was no limits, and that's why Go to Space is on the list. That's why, cover of Rolling Stone, these wild things that we never play basketball with Obama. That was for us the hardest thing we could think of doing is for Canadians living on an island, and cut to years later, these bigger list items, they slowly start to fall off the list. So play basketball with Obama, write a New York Times bestseller, have a beer with Prince Harry, sit with Oprah. These list items that I was 100% convinced would never happen, they eventually started to come off the list. So
how did some of these things come together? Like the Prince Harry, how did that one happen? That seems impossible. Isn't he like protected by an entire fortress of like it sounds easier to get to Obama than Prince Harry to have a beer with the guy. It's not like he's sitting at a pub.
No. Well, he's not, but this is how these things go. Ironically, President Obama was 1,000 times harder than Prince Harry. And Prince Harry, we got very lucky. It was the right time where we were sharing our list with someone, and they said, I have a friend in London that is friends with him. I'll ask him, what he thinks. And his friend said, listen, if you write a letter, I'll submit it to his office. And so we wrote a letter explaining that we're going to be in London, and this is what we were doing, and this is why. And he agreed. And we met him in a secret little pub basement and had beer, and then we had dinner with him and hung out with him for the evening. And so that actually, sometimes these things are not as difficult as you might think.
That one was easy, yeah.
Yeah. And President Obama took like
easy.
3 years to
yeah, how did the Obama thing end up happening? He must have read your work. Did he read your work? I mean, did he read about you guys?
Long story short, we just drove to DC and tried to meet with as many politicians as we could. Anyone we could. We told them our story. We said, we're trying to play basketball with the president to prove that anyone can do anything. Can you put in a good word? We got all the way up to the Secretary of Transportation. He put in the call to the White House. We got an official no. But we'd learned about these secret basketball games that happened, and the personal aide of the president set up these games. And so we tried to contact him. We finally did. He said, I think I can make this happen. The press team said no. Then we, as a consolation prize, got invited for a tour at the White House. And we were on the White House basketball courts. And the president surprised us on the courts and walked on. And we were totally blown away. Cool. We didn't even think he was in town. And so, we got about 1,000 no's before that happened. But, we started to learn that this, the power of persistence. I think we all obviously know the power of persistence. We hear about it a lot. But I think the thing that's interesting is to think about that you actually don't know what you're possible. Well, you don't know what's possible until you're doing it. So sometimes you can't even think about what you're able to achieve. But that doesn't mean that it's not possible. You just have to take small steps towards that thing. And all of a sudden, you're going to be doing it. And you're going to be like, hey, wait, I used to think this was impossible. And this is happening right now. And so that's hopefully what I am going to instill in people, is that I'm no different than anyone else. You have the ability to prove to yourself that these things are possible just by starting today to move towards those things. Because a year from now, you're going to wish you started today. And it's not as hard as you think, right? It's just first things first, write it down. Write your list. Because these things aren't real. They're thoughts. But once you write them down, they actually go from something that's intangible to tangible. And that actually builds some accountability and helps you move towards them. Then you have a reminder that they exist too. So as you get buried by the day-to-day, you come back to your list and you're like, oh, this is the direction that I know I want to go. These are the things that are important to me. These are the things I won't regret on my deathbed. And, I talk about big list items and goals, but no big goal is greater than any small goal, right? Like when you think about a bucket list, I used to think adventure travel. I used to think skydive, travel to Europe. And adventure and travel is one of 10 categories of your life. So if you want your list to reflect all the things that are important to you that you won't regret on your deathbed, you want to write your adventure travel goals, but you also want to write your physical health goals, your mental health goals, your relationship goals, your financial goals, your giving goals. How do you want to make an impact? Your material goals, your creative goals. So that's why I made this journal, so you can write your list in those 10 categories and start to actually build that accountability, because the accountability piece through the research is one of the reasons why we don't do these. That's why we push them, because there's no deadlines for these goals. So we're continually saying, you know what? I got to get this work thing done. Let's push this till next week. Or this popped up that's more important. We got to push it to next year, guys. And 76% of people, they continue to push those things until they realize they're out of time. And that's why the biggest regret that people have on their deathbed is, I wish I would have lived for me, right? So they don't regret things that they did. They regret things that they didn't do. And that's
where is that come from? I mean, I guess it makes sense, and this thought of you make it to the end of life, and you look back and you think, I'm glad. I guess you're more regretful for what you did not do, relative to happy for what you did do. Is that just are humans always? Do humans just look at what they missed out on, or do we live these big lives of not doing the things we really want to do?
I think it's the latter. We live these big lives of not doing the things we really want to do. Not even consciously, though. I don't think it's necessarily like, we know the story of like, oh, my dad wanted me to be a doctor, and I really wanted to be a musician, and but I became a doctor, and now I regret, But I think that it's subconscious, that we see what other people do. We see what society values as success or celebrates as success. We subconsciously follow that path. And so this is from two places. There's research from Cornell and this psychologist, Tom Gilovich, who did a study called The Ideal Road Not Taken, which is published in the Psychology Journal of Motion, and he interviewed people on their deathbed, and he found that people regret their inactions versus actions. And the number one regret is not living my ideal self. So what that means is not living a life for me, living for what I thought I should do or what other people wanted for me. And that was 76% of people he asked on their deathbed. He asked them, what's your number one regret in your entire life? 3/4 of the people he asked said that. So that's the biggest regret people have at the end of their life.
Ben, hold on. This is another thought here as our audience is kind of thinking through thinking through this, and it's almost as though these items on your list are just all and this is your verbiage, I think, is radical. They're possibilities. Mm-hmm. They're possibilities. All these things are possible to do, and you have to almost think a little bit. It's almost as though we need to be more creative around what might even be possible to do. And then we write it down, and then we have this accountability. And this has really been a movement now for you. This has been over a decade of you doing this, or more than that. No, 2006. It's been like
15 years.
Almost. It's in 15 plus years.
Yeah, it has been an unexpected road. And we had actually, one of the things was to make a TV show. So we did a show with MTV that brought us down to the States, and from there. So
you were in Canada, Ben, when you did the show with MTV?
No,
when you started Buried Life.
We were in Canada when we started Buried Life. 2006 to 2009, we would do it. We'd self-fund it. We were filming this documentary. We would do it every summer. And then we ended up cutting our own pilot. And I met someone that knew someone in LA. And so I flew down and started to understand the business of the entertainment business and figuring out what we needed to do to sell a show. And we ended up being able to sell the show as executive producers so that we could maintain the control and IP and be able to make the show that we thought our friends would think would be cool and inspiring. And so that was a completely, new beast for us, creating a network television show. And from there, after that, that's when we wrote the book, What Do You Want to Do Before You Die? But this sort of next phase for me, which has been very unexpected, was a couple of years later, I did a TEDx talk. I think it's called 6 Steps to Crossing Anything Off Your Bucket List. And then 2 years later, someone invited me to speak at a conference. And from there, I got invited to more. And then so now I've been re-inspired by this idea and figuring out, like once I read this research about 76% of people regretting, their biggest regret being that they didn't live for them. And I started to think like, what a terrible feeling on your deathbed to feel like you blew it and you're out of time. Like I can't even imagine how devastating that would be. And that's 3/4 of the population. Like, how is this happening? And then I thought, well, like, why is it then that like when you almost die, then things fall, you get this perspective? Or why is it when your mom or your partner passes away that you hear like, oh, everything changed after that. Now I knew what was important. And so I started.
Does that happen, by the way, or is that fleeting, Ben? Does that happen?
I think it's fleeting, but it does. You do have this moment, but I think that it's fleeting because the poem written 150 years ago was written 150 years ago for a reason, because life has a way of starting to bury these things that are important to you. And so what we need to do is we need to create accountability. We need to create inspiration by taking action, not waiting to feel inspired. And the biggest is we need to move through fear. So these are the 3 barriers that the psychologist from Cornell identified as the top 3 things stopping people from living true to themselves. And so for me, I started to realize, well, a bucket list, that's actually a very, it's kind of an elegant way to identify what these things are. And also it's a good way to start because it's so easy. Like writing your goals, it seems small, but it's very powerful. And I started to realize, like, why do so many people not do these things? And it's actually not as hard as it looks. And so I looked at the science of achieving goals and the research behind the science of goals achievement, and it's really simple things. And so a lot of those things are inherent in writing your list. And so that's why you want to write down your goals, and you want to write down your goals in a place that you keep, so that you can revisit them and you can update those goals as you grow. And you want to share your goals. You know, most people don't share their list and their personal dreams.
Okay, so this is kind of this public versus private. Like, do you want to make them known to the world? I mean, you guys started out very public.
Very public.
You guys were like very public. Talk about accountability.
Oh, we would drive up to radio stations in our crappy RV and just park in the parking lot until they put us on air because they wanted us to leave. And we would share our list and say, hey, can anyone help? And what is your dream? Send it to us. And by doing that, it works. Think about this. Accountability, it absolutely works. That's why we have all these accountability structures in the workplace. Leaders keep us accountable. A salary keeps us accountable. We don't want to let down our team. That keeps us accountable. We don't want to look bad. That keeps us accountable. We can create those same accountability structures around our personal goals by writing down our goals, by sharing them with other people. Because then if I tell you right now, Wes, my biggest goal, I'm going to write a book this year. And I run into you in a couple months and you say, Ben, how's the book coming?
Man?
Yeah. And I'll say, great. And they'll think, I better start writing that book.
Yeah.
And so
oh shit, I haven't even started.
Yeah, exactly. So
but I have a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. So you feel accountable to the people you shared. And then if you want to increase your chances by 77%, you send regular updates. I would send you regular updates, or you would be my accountability partner. I'd say, Wes, I'm gonna write a book. You're gonna be my accountability partner. I don't want you to check in on me once a week. Even better, I'm gonna send you an update at the end of every week of my progress, right? So that's how can we create that accountability? Maybe it's me blocking out my calendar 2 hours every Friday afternoon. This is my book writing time. This is my time where I hang out with my son. This is my time where I go to violin practice. This is my time when I go to improv. This is my time when I volunteer at the thing that is important to me. Whatever that is, you need to protect that time. First, you need to figure out what the thing is, and then you need to build accountability and protect time to do that thing, just like you would protect time for a very important meeting or for something else you aren't going to miss. And by sharing that, that helps, because then when you tell your colleagues, when you tell your family, hey, I'm gonna perform a show, comedy show, in a year. But I'm gonna go to improv every Friday at 4, and then it's a busy day at work, and 4 rolls around, and someone's like, hey, you got to go to improv. Don't worry, I got you, because they know this is important to you. So not all people are going to be supportive, but that's the piece of like surrounding yourself with people that inspire you. They support you to do the things that they know that you really truly want to do. And so that's the accountability piece, which is big. But the other piece is fear, and that's what stops most people.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to ask you next. Is that how is it that we're just not as creative on what we should or we could even have not unlocked our minds of what we could do? I don't know if I'd ever even. What a great idea to have a beer with Prince Harry. I don't know. That gives me it spurs my creativity on I guess my bucket list, which I've never written before. Mm-hmm. But what about fear? Are we also just afraid to do a comedy show in a year? Are we afraid to write a book? Are we afraid to track down Oprah?
Yeah, we're afraid to fail, and we're afraid of what other people think. Which we think will go away. Like we'll think we'll be ready, and all of a sudden we won't have the fear of standing up on stage and public speaking, or we won't have the fear of doing the concert, or we won't have that fear of what other people think. But as you know, as I know, and as we all know deep down, these are human fears that don't go away. But what does happen is you can get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you know that you're growing, and that by doing these things and pursuing them, you're going to be vulnerable. And that's good, because that means you're pushing yourself to grow, and you're going to learn something at the very least. Even if you fall flat on your face, at least you're going to learn something about yourself. And so this fear of failure is like a tax you have to pay to achieve your goals. You just have to pay it. And so, but I think it's also fun to think about the fear of what other people think. Because when it comes to the fear of what other people think about you, I hate to break this to you, but I just don't think people are thinking about you as much as you think they are. Right?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, Ben, is that, and I think too, and it's maybe even easier when you're in the media.
Yeah.
I think it's even easier to understand that, because when you're in the media, you can do everything in the world and have this audience, and there's still so many people that still don't know you, and they still don't think about you, and they really don't care, because what they really care about is what they're living with. So talk about that for me. I think it's an important point to tell people that, look, people do not care if you fail, because they're thinking about other things. Is that true?
I believe so. Think about how much you think about other people and what they do. You're too busy. You're too busy worried about what other people are thinking about you. You're too busy living your life. You're too busy. It's just, you're not that important, which is good, and I think that also of course, if they do think about you and they do have this thought of like, oh man, what a loser. That guy tried that thing and failed. What a loser. You probably don't want to be around that person anyway. So it's a good way to actually weed out the people that you don't want to surround yourself with. But, when I think back to high school and like putting all that pressure on myself and missing that kick, in the final game, and how devastating that was for me.
That was a very public thing for you.
That was a huge public thing. And I think about how much that scarred me, and that was trauma. Trauma comes from anything, and for me, that was it. That was I cared so much about being cool and having people like me that for me, nothing could be worse than publicly, messing up like that and letting everyone down. And this was like, in where I grew up, that's like football in the South. It's everything, right? Like rugby is a big thing. And now I look back, I'm like, who cares? Like nobody, that was made up, at that point, that was the biggest thing. And now I don't even think about it. And I think about the other things I worried about when I was younger, and I can't even remember those things that would keep me up at night. And so I think like, that's why using death to put things in perspective is good. It's like, okay, I'm worried about this thing. Is this something that I'm going to be worried about and think about in 5 years, or on my deathbed? Is that really something that's going to keep me up at night then?
Let's talk about building a list. If I want to sit down and really do this, is it, you've got, what is the purpose behind each one of these things? Am I scared to do one of these things? Like, what makes a good list, and what is the mindset you want to get yourself in? And do you still say imagine if you had $10 million in the bank?
Yeah, I still do. I still think it's a good place to start from a belief that anything is possible. And I really don't.
Maybe some inflation. You might want to bump that to 15.
Yes, exactly. 100. See, what's it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's bump that up to 109.
Yeah.
And then I think that's, and also I think even before that, you just want to slow down and be quiet, and to give yourself space to think about what's important to you. And that's key too, because you may be writing things that you think you should do, but not necessarily what you truly want to do. And that takes a little bit of reflection. So you find some quiet time, you get a piece of paper, or you get a journal, or, that's why I keep talking about this bucket list journal, because I think it's a good framework. But you want to write down.
But that's the name of this. Have you finished this project yet, or is this already out, or not yet?
Yeah, this is out.
It's called the Bucket List Journal.
Yeah, the Bucket List Journal. Yep. Okay. And so the Bucket List Journal starts with first writing your list in 10 categories of your life. So then I think it's less daunting to think about these 10 categories versus like, what are all the things I want to do? So
okay, so this is where you go to like travel
and adventure,
mental.
Exactly. So where have you dreamed of going? What is experience that you absolutely would love to do? So those, I think, are easier for us to think about. Go to the Great Wall of China, see my favorite band, go skydiving, those types of things. But then physical health is also one. What is there something that's holding you back physically? Do you have an ailment that you want to heal, or you want to achieve something like a marathon, or maybe it's like go for a walk 3 times a week. So there's also in the bucket list journal is the do's and don'ts of writing your list. So you want to make sure that your list is actionable, so that you know when you cross it off. So you don't want to say prioritize love, or get in shape, or travel more. You want to say go on 1 new date per month, run 5 miles twice per week, visit 3 countries this year, so that you know when you've done it, and it's you can cross it off, and it's specific, right? So anyway, let's go through these 10 categories just so we have an idea. You can
I want to hear these.
We'll put this website on, because the bucket list journal, bucketlistjournal.co, there's the 10 categories, so you can go look at them. But it's physical health goals.
Okay, cool.
Material goals.
.co. Okay. Yep.
So that's like, you can, it's okay to have material goals. Buy the sailboat, get the skis you want, surprise your kids with a new car. Creativity. I think this is a really fun, interesting category, because I think we overlook creativity as kind of a pillar of wellness. Because when you do things when you express your creativity, you're being that true version of yourself. You're letting that inner child out, that play. That's where you feel in flow state. So you're playing music, you're doing some art, you're doing photography. I think that these are good things to think about. Start your YouTube
By the
channel.
way, what is that for you? Is that film? Is that film for you? Is that your most creative outlet, or writing?
Yeah,
or what is it for you?
Exactly. Film and writing, and sport. I got into tennis. It's not a creative, but I do. That is when I feel in a flow state is playing tennis. So, professional category of life, financial. Mm-hmm. Intellectual, what do you want to learn? Mental health, we talked about that at the beginning of the podcast. So these are all things that are going to bring you a sense of well-being, lower your stress.
By the way, Ben, did that ever come back for you? I mean, you went through a tough period of time. Did that ever revisit, or did this project and this life kind of set you free from that?
No, it'd be nice if it did. Yeah, no, so I have experienced a few bouts of depression since that first one. Each one has been less intense, because as I said, like I've learned things. I now know myself a little better. I can see the signs coming. I have a tendency to overwork myself, and now I can see that train coming, and I know, like, I better get my sleep. I better take some time off. I better just go hang out with friends and go surfing and I have a support network, I have a great therapist that I talk to. There's friends that I know I can call at any time and they'll be there for me. And I also built up like a toolkit of habits that I know are good for me. So like, I think we should all have our own kind of mental health toolkit, which are habits that we know work for us so that we can just use them. Could be exercise, could be mindfulness, could be helping someone else, could be nature, could be connecting. These are all things that I think we should all have. So that's the 8th category is mental health. The 9th is relationships, which is one of the top 5 regrets of the dying is I wish I would have stayed in contact with old friends. So that's a pretty big one that is not really as difficult as you would think, right? Like
it's really not, especially not in the world we live in today. It's not at all.
Yeah. So,
but again, maybe it is because of our time, and that goes back to how much it's about prioritization or accountability. Do you really want to put it on your list or not? Right.
Exactly. Well, I think it comes back to the people you surround yourself with, right? What relationships do you want to invest in? Because you have to invest in any relationship or it'll go away. So who are those people in your life that you feel like encourage you to be the person you know you want to be? And that is such a powerful thing that I think I was lucky to stumble into, and I still do that to this day, which is being intentional about the people I surround myself with, because what they do, like, so by doing what you love, you inspire other people to do what they love. So people think that it's selfish to have a bucket list or to be doing the things that are important to them, but it's actually service because you're inspiring others to do the same. So I used to think a bucket list was selfish until I started to see hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people around the world going after their list just because we went after ours. So, for instance, I'm sure many people have come up to you and said, Wes, what you do is inspiring. You've inspired me to do this, or you inspired me to think about that. So by you following your true course, you've inspired others to follow their true course. And that is a massive ripple effect that's created. And I actually think, I don't want to be cheesy about this, but if more people did what they love, the world would be a much better place.
I almost think of this though, as I think this through, I have two things that to me are little hurdles to do this.
Yeah.
One, first of all, it sounds fun. It's very fun just to do, but the hurdles I have mentally are, one, some of these are, do I just want to do this for a reason that doesn't have enough weight to it, or should I do this? Does there have like some? So I feel like how do I avoid putting frivolous bucket list items, if you will, versus powerful bucket list items? And then, so I want to ask you that. And then the second thing I don't want to forget to ask is that, and you just touched on this, is that what is too much? Like, what is too big of an item? Like, if you say, I want to do this, like, wait, whoa. Like, that's not a bucket list. That's you've gone too far now, Wes.
You've gone too far,
Ben,
Wes.
that's overly ambitious.
Yeah.
Gone too far.
Okay, let's do that question first.
Okay.
What is too much? What is too big? You've gone too far, Wes. I don't think that that if it is something that you truly, truly want, I don't think there is a too much or too far. So that comes back to your first question, is how do you figure out what those things are? And that is I don't think there's a silver bullet for that. I think it takes time and quiet time. I also think it probably takes time talking about it with people that you care about. It's a great exercise to do a bucket list with your partner or do it with your family, because it opens up this conversation about like, what is really important to us? What do we actually want to achieve, and not just go through the day to day? And what are we aiming towards? You know, taking out, you want to take off your own restrictions, but you also want to take out the restrictions of the list so that it can be anything. So that, you know, climb Everest is just as important or less, it could be less important to you than, you know, spending one afternoon a week on your own so that you can just go out and be in nature. So that's the key is, and that's also the hard part, is figuring out what those things are for you that are going to bring you that sense of fulfillment. And I think one way that I found to be helpful to identify what those things are is consulting my future self. So consulting my 90-year-old self. And so if I'm at a crossroads thinking, should I do this? I ask my 90-year-old self, will I regret not doing this? Because I'm just trying to not have those regrets. And if my 90-year-old self is like, yeah, you might regret this, then I'd like to try.
No, I think that the core of that, those are two different ways to look at it. One, this true test is it really a true love?
Yeah, true love is a good word.
It's a true love. And two, spending some time to talk it out and actually think about it, and not just frivolously like, okay, do a do a 5-minute bucket. It's not like a 5-minute thing. And then it went for the more complicated ones, and I'm just thinking about the bigger complicated ones that are hitting my head here as we talk. I think that the final analysis there is that question on the 90-year-old self.
Yeah.
Right. And you look back to say, I really did want to, really wish I would have done that. And that is not an answer you can say today at 30 necessarily, or 40 or 50. It sounds, the perspective of I'm 90 and I'm about to die, that it does feel like some real perspective to be able to answer that question.
Yeah.
So I really like that. Yeah.
And I think too, it's that, you know, the key is as your 90-year-old self, I wish I would have tried to do that, because it's not necessarily about the outcome. It's about trying to do it because it was something that you truly wanted to do, and you went for it. And then you know what? I didn't do it, but I tried, and I did, and I put everything that I could towards that. You know, and then there's the next section is like, okay, how do you achieve those things and make those big things happen? And that's a whole different thing. But I think when you distill it down, it's about not having the regret that you didn't even go for it.
Okay, so that is a really important point, is that you do not have to get to the top of Everest. You don't have to get there, but you can have tried dramatically, right? It's like there's a blizzard and there was another, but to your point, and maybe that's a bad example because you could eventually get to the top. But your point is, as long as you're trying to do something like this, you can at least fulfill that position on your bucket list. And I like that.
Yeah. And I think even the deeper meaning behind that is that you are being true to yourself, because this is something that you truly wanted to do, and you are in alignment with that, and you are living your ideal self, not your ought self. And the ought self is what
ought self. What is what is that?
The ought self is what I ought to do.
Yeah.
So that's what the psychologist Gilovich, that's how he defined the ideal self versus the ought self. And so I think that when we are living our ideal selves, we are the truest version of ourselves, and therefore we are happier. We are, we live this a bit more of a fulfilled life. I think that's why it's sort of money doesn't necessarily bring that exponential happiness because you're making exponentially more money. I forget what the number is, but after X thousands of dollars, you double that again. It's incremental increase in happiness, like 0.1%. And so I think it's coming back to, and we all have friends that are just super happy and don't have a lot, but they seem to just do the things that they want to do, and they're happy people.
No, you're exactly right. I call that because I've done a lot of money happiness research, the Plateau Effect, which is essentially diminishing marginal happiness.
Yes.
Is what it is per new dollar, right? It's like the first few dollars really do help because you got to at least be able to have a house.
Yeah, you need those basic needs,
resources,
and you want to have the freedom.
And then it becomes diminishing, yeah.
And then it becomes at some point a burden. Sometimes
it can be. So what if we're listening today? If you're stuck, what is a small step forward? Because when I first started reading about you, I thought, bucket list. I can put down, like 100 things. And then the more I've thought about it, it feels like there's more to it than just like a list of fun shit I want to do. Like there's some thought that needs to go into it. So how do I at least start that today?
Well, I think you start by first writing down anything you think could be on your list. So just starting by, if anything were possible, it's a blank canvas. What would you do? Write those down. Then if you're having trouble thinking about more things, go to those 10 categories of life and fill in that list more with those prompts or those other categories. And then, what you could do if you wanted to sort of identify what one of the most important things on your list is, you can imagine that you come across a magic lamp and you rub the magic lamp and a genie pops out and genie says, "Congratulations, I'm a genie. That means I'm going to grant one wish on your list. But by me helping you do that one thing, you can never do anything else on your list." So what do you choose? What's this one thing that's so important that you're not going to do anything else? And so that is one way to identify the most important thing on your list. And so now you're like, okay, this is really, really important to me. What are 3 things I can do within 48 hours? What are 3 48-hour action items? Simple, small things. One could be calling someone asking for help. We a lot of times we don't ask for help because of the fear. So it could be, any number of things, right? But what are 3 things that you can do? And because inspiration is a momentum game, you're the architect of your own inspiration by taking action. So sometimes we over plan, and we plan, we're waiting for that right time, but we forget that action is a plan. So you don't need to know how you're going to achieve the goal. You just need to start with that first step, and you'll figure out the second step after the first. And so that is why you break it down to very small, simple steps, like a work project. And so I think writing it down and then sharing it, and then building those accountability structures that I talked about.
If you were to do this, and you're a pretty young guy, so you probably hadn't thought about retirement maybe just yet, but this is the Retire Sooner podcast. So your advice is so applicable. What would you give advice to somebody who is going into the non-work mode, into retirement?
The best time to start your list. I think that from what I've heard, it's a difficult transition for some people to lose that huge driving purpose, which is your work that has been giving you that sense of fulfillment for the last 50 years. And so what else will give you that purpose? And I think I actually, I spent some time speaking to retirement communities, not just people, residents, but also leadership at the communities, and talking about this idea that we really talk about how the mainstream narrative is the youth are going to change the world. We got to, they're the ones that are going to shift this. And I actually think it's the opposite. I think it's the it's retirees that have the real power to change the world, because they have the knowledge, they have the disposable income, they have the network, they have the mind that they've, been in business for X number of years, and now they have the time. And so to think that like as you retire, that's it, is the opposite of what we should be talking about. It should be about, now is your opportunity to make a real impact. And through my experience, because we've done something on our list and we helped someone else and we achieved these big list items, but we helped other people, it's the moments when we shared someone else's experience with them that meant so much to them that I guarantee I will remember on my deathbed. And so I think it's thinking about what are those things in the giving category of life, which is your legacy, that you start to think about as well.
Ben, last question. I think about, you had said you had 4 out of the 100 left on that original 100. Do you do a bunch? How many new bucket list items do you do a year? And how many do you have? Like, give me a recent bucket list item. If you keep doing, I would suspect you keep adding to the list, right?
Yeah. And everyone should, because you're growing, you're changing, and your goals are changing. And so you may have, the things on the original list, I definitely wouldn't want to do anymore. I don't want to streak a field and try and get away. I don't want to try and ask out Megan Fox anymore. I don't want to, survive on a deserted island.
Did you do that? Is that on the list?
It was. I tried to.
Was that on the list?
I tried to. I failed, actually, quite out of my face, pretty badly, actually. I snuck onto the red carpet at the Transformers premiere with a microphone pretending I was a reporter, and I had her in front of me, and then her publicist just pulled her away as I was about to, so I sort of blew the moment. But my friend Duncan, who is one of the other guys, the next year, it was Ask Out the Girl Your Dreams was the list item. And so he actually was able to learn from my mistakes, and he asked out Taylor Swift and actually went on a date with her once or twice, and we stuck him into the CMT Awards and got him in, and he got in front of her. And so anyhow,
once or twice, that means that was like a real date.
I think it was like a real it definitely was a real.
That's legit.
It happened. Yeah. It happened. So more than I can say from my efforts. But point is, you tried. I exactly. And also, that was something that my younger self wanted to do, and I don't want to do that anymore. But there's new things that I want to do, and writing the bucket list journal was one of them. I'd like to do more thing. I go to space is on the list. So I'm working with a company called Worldview that's sending people to space in these capsules that go up slowly with a big helium balloon. And I was speaking at South by Southwest about the democratization of space travel, because now more and more companies are popping up at lower price points. And the point is, I want to experience the overview effect, which is,
well, you don't have you don't have $20 million right, to go to space for 10 minutes.
Not with inflation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to experience that like looking at the Earth and astronauts talk about that changing your perspective, which again, it can be like a moment of clarity, or that wake up. So I'm adding to the list, and some of the things I'm adding.
Shoot, I think you may have just talked me into that one, because I've actually poo-pooed. I think not long ago I made fun, and this is mostly out of jealousy, made fun of Jeff Bezos, maybe like a year ago when he did Blue Origin. I'm like, these guys are so bored. They got nothing left to do. Now they got to spend $20 million to go to space. But it is interesting, though, that you say that the perspective, something the thought of seeing the whole world is actually really the entire, as if you could just put it in your hand. It is that is kind of cool. I can see that.
Yeah, it's sort of this sense of we're all connected. It's interesting. Like astronauts talking about the overview effect or this orbital effect.
I've taken up enough of your time. This is so great.
Thank you.
What is the most fun thing you're doing right now? I know that you got bucket list journal that's out. What's the most fun thing you're doing right now? Obviously this show, but how often do you?
Yeah.
How often of the year are you doing that?
Yeah. So I'm spending most of my time speaking, just because I actually love it. Talking to a bunch of people about this idea and getting them seeing them turn in the audience, and experiencing that in person, is something that I really enjoy. And so, I speak, I don't know, 120 times a year. Yeah.
Ooh,
So
that's a lot, man.
That's
okay.
my full-time focus, really. But it was sort of by accident. But, and then one of the things on my list is now to slow down.